We'll go ahead and call the special council meeting to order for Monday, the 21st. May we have the roll call, please?
Mayor Kusamoto.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Murphy.
Here.
Councilmember Chirko.
Here.
Councilmember Gross.
Here.
Councilmember Hasselbrink. Here.
Okay. On the agenda, we have item 3A. It's zoning code, zoning map, and subdivision codes update. I guess City Manager.
Honorable Mayor, council members, first of all, thank you very much for being here an hour early tonight and giving us an opportunity to present this to you and hopefully have a discussion with you. Our interest here is to hopefully make sure you're at a comfort level with a lot of information. I know we threw a lot at you to read over the last few days, and thank you for the time that you spent on this. A matter of background history, this process has been going on for quite some time. This started in, I think it was late 2017, and was really a result of the general plan update that was completed in 2015. General plans, once you update your general plan, you're required by state law to ensure consistency between the general plan, your zoning code, and your zoning map. And so it's been a long effort to go through that exercise and come before you tonight. So in order to assist staff with that, a private consulting firm, MIG, was hired, planning consulting firm, to help us through that update effort. There were a number of meetings conducted over the last 3 years. We had 11 meetings just at the staff level. There were 7 stakeholder meetings conducted over the last 3 years. There was an advisory committee formed. I believe a couple of you sat on that. There were 5 of those advisory committee meetings conducted. We also had 3 study sessions with our planning commission, very engaged and fairly long, but fruitful and productive study sessions. We then introduced to the planning commission at their June 26th meeting earlier this year, the draft zoning code. Quite a bit of discussion at that time as well. And as a result, there were a few changes that were brought forward. And the reason why that's important is that those changes ended up requiring some general plan amendments. So if you recall, we actually came back to council asking for authorization to go forward with that. That's all been completed. And then at the September 25th meeting last month, the Planning Commission had their final review of all 3 items, and now we're before you this evening. So again, there are really 2 main objectives of this exercise, and that is to update the zoning and subdivision codes, but also to update the city's zoning map and make sure that, again, there's consistency throughout. We also have to address the consistency of the general plan. There's a variety of policies, programs, as well as, again, the general plan map itself, land use map. In addition to that, we also looked at a variety of code changes and updates. So we weren't just entirely focused on the consistency of the general plan. There were a few other points that we felt were important at the staff level, as well as through the advisory group and through the commission that felt were necessary to consider. And then again, as I mentioned earlier, there were some additional general plan amendments that became a necessity as a result of that. So in summary of the actual zoning code amendments, we focused on the elimination of conflicts with other code provisions. There were a number of those that needed to be addressed. We also established the town center mixed use zone. That was a key item within the general plan. That is primarily the area at Costella and Los Al, and that general area and those properties fronting those 2 main arterials. So it created that mixed use zone. We also eliminated, or is proposed for elimination, the limited industrial zone and integrating those properties into the planned light industrial zone, and allowing also for certain commercial recreation uses to be in that PLI zone with the issuance of a conditional use permit. We also modernized the land use tables, trying to simplify the development standards in all of our zones. That's always a key item, as it's not only us as staff reviewing that, but the general public reviews that as well. We want to make sure it was as easy and as simple to follow as possible. We also took a look at our parking standards and made some adjustments to that. That wasn't a comprehensive assessment, but there were some minor adjustments to our parking standards. we looked at our sign standards. There was some inconsistency with federal provisions that were put into effect, so we wanted to make sure that was addressed and that any case law matters were fully addressed with that. We also added a live-work overlay zone, and also the language before you provides for administrative review of minor site development permits, and that's basically for smaller development activity that's 2,500 square feet or less in size. Right now, if, let's say, a commercial building were expanding, even if it were a fairly minor expansion, they'd have to go back through a site development permit review process. This process would simplify that and make it at an administrative level. We also addressed our temporary use permit regulations, and there were some very minor changes to our subdivision code as well. With regards to the general plan amendments, those were not originally planned, but they became necessary due to language that actually the commission came up with going through this process. There were 3 key points within those amendments, clarifying the professional office designation allows retail and service commercial uses in addition to office uses. It also eliminates the limited industrial district and only having the planned light industrial district. It also amends the general plan dwelling units per acre for the multifamily residential district. That district had a range, or has a range, I should say, right now up to 30 units per acre. The proposed amendment would actually drop that down to a maximum density of 25 units per acre. And then again, as I mentioned previously, we brought that before you. It was actually your July 15th meeting to affirm going forward with those amendments. With regards to the zoning map amendment, there's really 3 key items I'd like to point out. One is, again, the creation of the town center mixed-use zoning district, defining that within our zoning map, and that is consistent with the land use map that was in the general plan. Again, the elimination of the limited industrial zoning district, and that being absorbed by the planned light industrial district, and then the live-work overlay zone is also identified on the map. I'd like to point out that there were well over 100 parcels that are experiencing some type of a zoning district change. And I really want to point out that Tom Oliver, our associate planner, spent a tremendous amount of time on this. We sent individual letters out to every property owner, every parcel that was identified, specifically identifying the actual change. Tom facilitated a number of questions that came in over a period of time, and I'd like to say that the amount of response or concerns have been minimal, and I give a lot of that credit to the fact that staff, Tom in particular, spent a lot of time talking directly with a number of property owners in our community. Let's see. So with regards to the Planning Commission action, as I mentioned earlier, there were a number of Planning Commission meetings, and the Commission really took this to task. It was very encouraging to see that it was very laborious. Some of our meetings went quite long. They really took it to task with a lot of questions being asked of staff and of our consultant team. The study sessions were, again, very engaging and resulted, I think, in a very good draft document coming forward. That document was introduced to the Commission at the June 26th meeting, and as we talked about before, we came about with the general plan amendments, and then the final package was presented to them last month. And really, I think is a testament also to the amount of work and effort that went into this, is that the Commission has moved unanimously to recommend City Council approval of all of the items before you this evening. So with that, we have we have obviously the standard language for your consideration later tonight, but with that, that's really a very quick overview of what transpired. I know there's a lot there, and that's why we wanted to have this workshop. And again, I just want to mention also that our consultant team, MIG, was phenomenal with this effort, as was Mr. Oliver, who spent a tremendous amount of time on it. But both Tom and I are here to answer any questions you have, and I'll conclude at this time.
Great, thank you. So do we have questions for staff, or Les or Tom?
With the zoning code changes and the affected properties, they're grandfathered in. It would only be if a change of ownership or a change of lessee.
It would depend on the situation, but yes, typically, if it's a grandfathered situation, it stays with the property. So let's say if it's a property setback issue, that would stay with the property regardless of ownership, but it would require, depending on the situation, would require them to update that in order to expand or enlarge or modify going forward. If it's a use situation, it's based on change of use. So if that use changes, then it would have to conform to the new
What
code.
if it's not a change of use, but just simply a change of ownership? So it's from one gym to the other, but that zone no longer allows that use in there.
I believe the way we have it established here, I'm trying to remember from memory on this, and Tom may chime in, but I believe the way we have it set up, if it's issued with, unless there's a condition associated with it, like a conditional use permit was granted, it stays with the land. A lot of times it does not change because if I sold it to you per se, as long as the use is staying the exact same, unless there's a condition that's been established that prohibits that, then it would stay with the.
So that use would stay grandfathered?
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
And then while we're on that, I'm sorry, do you need a question?
Yeah, just a quick one. The changes that are being made in Sacramento on increased density and multi-level, is that addressed in here, or we're just going to deal with that as it comes down, or we have no ability to deal with it at all?
Thank you, Councilmember Gross, for bringing that up. I neglected to mention, there has been recent legislation that was just signed by the governor in the last few weeks. A couple of, well, more than a couple, but 2 important bills that we know will have an impact going forward that we will be back before you. Has to do with accessory dwelling units and affordable housing. So we're still trying to assess and evaluate that to determine how that's going to affect our code, but we know there will be changes going forward. We're not trying to anticipate, but in these instances, respond and react to what gets approved, only because, as we saw this last legislative session, I think just in housing bills alone, there were over 100 introduced, and yet only a handful made it through and were signed by the governor. But we do have some going forward that we will have to respond to, but we didn't want to adjust what's before you. There's been a lot of work to this, but there will be that need probably in the next 90 to 120 days to have to go back and address those areas that are pertinent to the new legislation.
But does that impact the 20 to 25 dwelling units per acre versus the 30?
No, at this time, we don't believe it will.
Okay.
We're probably more interested in the new accessory dwelling unit provisions and how that's going to affect our community. But again, there are mandates that we'll have to adhere to that are now law.
Okay, so the dwelling, the density of dwelling units per acre is, we're probably good with what we've established, because that, of course, drives housing, correct?
Yes, sir. At this point, we believe that we're okay with that. If I could, really quick, too, the town center mixed use zone is really the one area that we anticipate going forward, that if there were a greater intensity of or density of residential, it would be in that mixed use zone. So as you'll recall, we came before you, I believe, last meeting with regards to a grant opportunity with the state, and we're hoping to look closer at the town center mixed use zone because that would be the area we would anticipate a higher density and likely having to address some of the affordable housing items once the arena allocation is figured out here in the next few weeks.
And I have a question on, I think to tag on with Shelley's question, on the property owners that were affected, grandfathered in perhaps, did we make 100% contact, or there were just 100 people? And
Yeah, well, we mailed to 100% of them and
Okay.
then talked to quite a few of them.
some might be out of state, right? Or,
Right.
yeah, absent.
And something to add to that, too, is most of these changes actually give them more rights. The town center mixed use just subtracts a couple of the uses that can't be there in the future, but most of it actually gives people more stuff they can do on their property.
Nice, okay, thank you. And then on what you brought up about the minor site development permits of 2,500 square feet or less, and you gave the example of maybe a big project that needed some kind of change, and you can do that administratively. But does this also apply to small developments that could be done administratively that are within the permitted use? It may require a CUP, so you can administratively do that?
It would not be for a conditional use permit. This would just be for the site.
Permitted,
development.
permitted use then?
Correct. Only
Okay,
for permitted uses. Conditional still have the
Okay.
standard procedure.
thank you. Any other questions?
One last one. Last Saturday, I was at a coffee with the assemblyman for our district, and he made comment about the changes in the housing stuff that the governor had approved, that the prior governor had rejected. He mentioned there was a great deal of money available that was being made specifically available to local government. I asked the question because I was under the impression nothing comes to local government, it goes to the county, and then the county allocates it out. And he said that basically was true, but it was important for us to stay engaged with our counterparts at the county to make sure that the share that would be available to us, we go after, because that funding is there. And it also has the impact on homelessness, and possibly some of that money can be used for the North County Spa commitments that we've already made. Especially, I'm more worried about not what we did this time, but what's going to be facing us going forward.
Yeah, again, we're still trying to understand, I'm still trying to understand the extent of the bills that were approved and signed into law, but you're correct, there are, I wouldn't say a substantial amount of funding, but there is funding. When you start dividing that up, if you will, it doesn't look as grand as it does when you see the numbers statewide or even countywide. And there are allocations to certain size cities too that get a cut out of that, et cetera. But yeah, we certainly will be spending more time on that, trying to understand that and ensuring that, that if there is an opportunity to utilize those funds to go after that. What I do know so far, a lot of those are project specific. So you'd have to have a project that qualifies and then go through the process to try and allocate those funds. It isn't a direct allocation of dollars. It has to be project related.
Do we have any of those pending anywhere that you're aware of?
In our jurisdiction, no. The funding that I saw was all affordable related, and at this point in time, we do not have any projects even in discussion with regards to providing affordable units.
Thank you.
Okay, no other questions? So I think with this, just simply receive. Oh, Richard?
It's not a question, it's a comment. Just want to thank my colleagues who are on the board, the Planning Commission, the staff, and our civilian members. And I think for the civilian people, we should at least get them a certificate, and if we could, get them in here and recognize them for the amount of time they put in on this. And if the staff wants a letter, we'll be happy to get you one too. Just let us know. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, with that, I guess it's just recommended general plan, including the zone code, zoning map, and subdivision. Is there any direction we need to provide the staff? Okay, seeing none, I think it's just receive at this point, right?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, this is actually an agendized item later tonight with a
Sure.
public hearing. But again, we wanted that opportunity in advance to talk with you directly and in preparation for tonight.
Understand. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Okay, with that, we'll adjourn to the regular meeting that will start at 6 p.m. Thank you. Stand in recess.